Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book, It Will Only Hurt for a Moment, by Delilah S Dawson. I am a very big Delilah S Dawson fan. She has written a lot of books that I really enjoy. She wrote some Star Wars books like Phasma and Black Spire and The Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade, that I love all those books. And she's also written some original books as like the Hit and Strike YA books. She's also written the Mine and Camp Scare middle grade books, and she also wrote one is probably my favorite book of hers, and that is The Violence, which is a thriller type horror book, post-apocalyptic type book that came out about 2 years ago, and I read it and loved it. Was very impressed by it. And so when Del Rey announced that they had another Delilah Dawson book coming out, this one being another thriller, I thought, oh, it's like, The Violence was a thriller. This is going to be the thriller. And so I was really excited. I was also kind of excited how short it was because I was like, yeah, it'll be a nice quick read. And I pretty much read this in about a day. However, this book is not really as strong as The Violence at all. The Violence was a top tier book for me. This book it's okay. It Will Only Hurt for a Moment is about a woman who is getting out of a bad relationship, and she decides to re-pursue her dream of working in pottery. And so she goes to this like artists retreat type thing where artists of all kinds, musicians and painters and woodworkers, people who do like all types of artwork, come in to just refine their craft and work for a few months or a few weeks. And so she goes there to try to escape her bad relationship while also working on herself and working on her craft. And while she's up there, a bunch of weird stuff happens. And without giving away any spoilers, our main character, Sarah, basically starts having historical hallucinations. She starts reliving historical events of this person through that person's perspective, and these are not pleasant events. And the book has a kind of a mystery to it. And so there are some parts of the book that I thought worked really well and some parts of the book that did not work really well. So it's very mixed. What worked well for me was the mystery. I wanted to find out what's behind this, what's causing this. People start dying at this place, and you're trying to figure out who's killing them. Is it a ghost? Is it a real person? Is it just nature? Like, what's happening? And so the mystery behind that was really interesting, and they try to uncover the mystery. I also really enjoyed kind of like the horror final girl type element to it, where like as the people are, who the final girl is, but you're just like, oh no, like who's gonna make it? And there's certain characters you kind of latch onto, and you're like worried, oh my goodness, these guys could die too, and so you get really connected to them. And so I did like that part of it. I also think that Delilah Dawson does an amazing job with deep themes. She asks questions about society that I find fascinating, and she really makes me feel in her books. She did the same in The Violence. She asked deep questions and had some really excellent themes in the book, even though I disagree with some of them. And same here. There's a lot of worldview stuff in the book that I disagree with, but I can still respect what Delilah Dawson turned in here. All of that being said, there were some things I disliked about the book as well. For instance, in the first chapter, I automatically disliked the main protagonist because she is so rude to her mother, and she is so dismissive and so eager to get her out of her life. And yes, her mother has a checkered past. Her mother had an alcohol problem in her past. However, the way that the main character is so callous, and the way that Dawson writes her in the first chapter as being eager to sever ties with her mother, stems from a very unlikable character. It makes me dislike the character because I want characters who are going to forgive, characters who are going to try to mend fences, characters who are trying to help her mother out. Her mother has made a lot of bad decisions, but I think that with the main character's help, she could have helped her mother with some things, and instead she's just so dismissive, so rude, so just eager to get rid of her, and it just automatically made me dislike the character. And that's not what you want from page one. What you want is for me to be endeared to the character. And I think Delilah Dawson intended for us to be endeared to the main character because she's saying, look at all this stuff she's gone through. She has a terrible ex-boyfriend, a terrible mother, her father's not there. Like there's all this stuff that's supposed to make you feel that she is, you're supposed to empathize with her. But I think Dawson did the exact opposite and made me dislike the character. Also, the book is pretty slow for the first about 100 to 150 pages. The mystery does not ramp up until about 150 pages in, which is about halfway through the book. And so the first half of the book was atmospheric, and you're getting to know the characters, and you're really just living in this world that she's established in this artist retreat. But it's the first half of the book is not that great. The second half of the book speeds along quite well, and I think the mystery is good in the second half. I think the story is pretty good. There is some horrific stuff in the second half, but I think it's still very briskly paced, which is similar to my criticism I had of the violence, although I will say I still think the violence's first act is significantly better than It Will Only Hear for a Moment's first act. I don't like the way that Delilah Dawson resolves the story. There is an obvious solution that Delilah wants to go for in the story, and I wanted an entirely different solution. I was like, hey, I have this idea of how to solve the problem, and it would be so cool to see this happen. And Delilah deliberately avoids that. On a similar note, there is a character here, a really interesting male character named Reed. And Reed is present in the first portion of the book, and I really liked him. And then he's just sidelined. And I felt that his character was drastically underutilized. And I think his character would, if he had been more present in the book, I think that it would have been more palatable, especially to male readers, because really almost all the characters except for the villains in the book are, and it's not just the villains like the mystery, but like the ex-boyfriend and stuff from the flashbacks that she's having are males, and so you don't have like a good guy to latch on to much in the story. In the violence, I also had a similar criticism, but there was more of a male character, especially towards the end, that I really respected. Here, just, Reed gets sidelined so much that I was like, well, his character is not going to be that character. So that was, I felt a little frustrated with that. And again, it's not necessarily bad writing. It's just, I think that this is what would have made it better and more appealing to readers like me. And I think that Delilah wanted to make it another type of book. This is a type of book that doesn't have to be a blockbuster, like a big franchise book, so you don't have to appeal to every audience. If you want to say, I'm going to appeal to this specific type of audience, I respect that. And that is exactly what happens here. I think that single women in their 30s are probably 30s and up, are probably going to love this book. That's my prediction. Guys, I don't think generally, I'm sure that if you're a guy and you've read this book, I'm sure you love it, but you probably won't love it as much. But that's okay for Delilah, because this is kind of a niche story for her to tell. So I had some other criticisms that were also spoilers, so I'm not going to go into those. I touched on worldview. Delilah has a very specific worldview that is in many ways, antithetical to my own. And I understand why Delilah has developed this worldview, but you see it in most of her books. And it makes it so that even though I think her stories, her plots are interesting, I think her characters are dynamic, and I think that her themes are great. All three of those she usually hits out of the park. Characters in this book, not so much. But I'm usually willing to overlook the worldview. But it gets frustrating when the worldview is very front and center in the book. So again, I had some pretty good positives. Loved the mystery. I loved the atmosphere in the book. And I really liked the second half of the story. But there were some things, there were some directions with the story I didn't like. I did not like the main character choices at all. And I also thought that there were some other things that were spoiler related that I didn't particularly like. But as a whole, I'm overall positive because it was a positive experience reading the book. But it's not a great book, or even I would say a good book. It's a fine book. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It edges into the positive range, but I'm just going to say it's fine. You know, I read it. I'm glad I read it. And I'm, giving more information about this book to people, but I didn't love it. So if you've read It Will Only Hurt for a Moment, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.